All right, welcome to our presentation on net zero buildings by Michael and
Evan. Table of contents. Introduction. In the introduction, we'll be talking about problems in Calgary. 2. Our solution. Our solution is net zero buildings to the problems in Calgary. Function. How do net zero buildings work? Economy. How much do they cost? Pros and cons. How can this help Calgary and what are the side effects? Conclusion. We'll be wrapping up what we said.
Part 1, Introduction, Problems in Calgary, Alberta. So before we talk about Calgary, we're going to talk about some global problems. So 40% of carbon emissions come from construction activities. This is resulting in an increase in climate change. 1/10 of the United States carbon emissions come from after the homes are built, the heating and cooking inside the homes and businesses. When we burn fossil fuels to create electricity, carbon is released into the atmosphere. Now, speaking more directly in Calgary, climate change is causing major heat waves, droughts, and severe storms. This is leading to longer, hotter, and drier summers. Alberta emits 250 megatons of greenhouse gases per year, the highest province in Canada. So what has the government done to kind of slow this down? Well, the Albertan government has invested around $800 million into lowering carbon emissions. This has funded multiple sectors over a course of 3 years. So why is this important to Calgary? Alberta is the financial center of Western Canada because of its key role in the oil and gas industry. As you can see here, Canada has an estimated 171 billion oil barrels, and around 166.3 billion of those barrels come from Alberta's oil sands. And Alberta actually has the third largest oil reserves in the world.
Number 2, our solution and what are net zero buildings? Net zero buildings. What is a net zero building? A net zero building is a building that produces as much energy as it makes. Here's an example. So net zero buildings have solar panels or a turbine, as you can see, and they produce energy. And the net zero building also has efficient lighting that doesn't use all the energy that the solar panels are using. And this is good because solar panels, like when the sun's not there at night, obviously, but people often go to bed. So if you're up at night and the lights are on, it's going to be more difficult. But if you go to bed at a reasonable time, not like 1 or 2, then you'll have good energy and you'll be able to turn on the lights and stuff. Example, this is a house built in Canada, and it has solar panels on the roof, as you can see, and it also looks like a pretty cool house, pretty cool modern house, and you see the solar panels on top, the efficient lighting. I think it's LED lights a little bit, so it reduces energy, and it looks like a pretty cool house.
All right, part 3, function. So how do they work? So net zero buildings work by making energy through many different types of renewable energy sources, including solar, wind, tidal, and even hydro. So here's an example, and of course this is a bit far-fetched, but you can see here that the house is covered in solar panels, it has lots of wind turbines, and it even has a hydroelectric generator hooked up to the river. All right, now we're going to watch this short video to give us a little bit more insight on what net zero buildings are.
Nearly 40% of all CO2 emissions come from construction activities, but only 3% of the total investment in building and designing a new project is efficient and eco-friendly. It shows an alarming trend since it will lead to excess carbon emissions for years to come, resulting in global warming, while the rest of the world is finding solutions to tackle the climate crisis. Sounds too gloomy and dark? Well, there is a way in which architects and engineers can help minimize and maybe reverse the process with sustainable building design, specifically net zero buildings. net zero buildings have emerged as the most crucial element in the 21st century architecture industry, with a major role in mitigating the impact of carbon emissions into the environment. If you want to know more about how architects and engineers can save the planet through net zero buildings, then keep watching this video. We'll be covering what net zero buildings are and why they matter. Simply put, net zero buildings are energy efficient buildings that generate as much energy as they consume. In other words, they produce zero net carbon emissions. Pretty cool, right? So how do net zero buildings achieve this? By using renewable energy sources like solar panels and wind turbines, and by reducing energy consumption through things like efficient insulation and lighting. The great thing about net zero buildings is that they benefit not only the environment, but also the people who live and work in them. A study by the Rocky Mountain Institute found that net zero buildings can reduce energy costs, save owners up to 80% on energy costs over the lifetime of the building, and also provide a healthier indoor environment. The Unisphere building in Maryland, USA is a great example of a net zero building. It is also among the biggest net zero projects in the world. The building has its own on-site solar energy, geothermal heat pumps, and an all-in-one control system for lighting, HVAC, and energy. Another example of an energy-positive building is the powerhouse Bratta Gaia, an 8-story office space in Norway, which uses less energy than it produces during the end of its entire life cycle. The structure contains natural refrigerant heat pumps at its water supply and 3,000 square meters of solar panels for cooling and heating. The structure uses both passive and active energy-saving techniques, including HVAC and lighting systems. But why do net zero buildings matter? Well, buildings and the construction industry in general are among the largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions. By constructing net zero buildings, we can significantly reduce our carbon footprint and combat climate change. Plus, net zero buildings are becoming increasingly popular and affordable, making them a viable option for new construction and retrofits of existing buildings. Soon, there will also be carbon negative buildings that will absorb more carbon than they emit over their lifetimes, aiding in the ever-increasing need for more eco-friendly energy sources. We will continue to see an upward trend in the adoption of carbon-neutral buildings, with stakeholders becoming more aware of the destruction that a non-green building can cause in the built environment. With architects and engineers leading the way for a more sustainable living environment, we are hopeful for a greener, better future. So there you have it, net zero buildings in a nutshell. They're energy-efficient buildings that generate as much energy as they consume, using renewable energy sources and reducing energy consumption. Not only do they benefit the environment, but also the people who live and work in them. And most importantly, they can help us combat climate change. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with the latest news and trends in the AEC industry.
Part 4, Economy. How much do they cost? Costs. For $175 to $180, you get about a square foot of a net zero home. To convert your old home into a net zero home, it'll cost around between $100,000 and $200,000. Economic impact. A net zero home, when building one, the net zero home would keep the economy the same, except in the future it will take a hit since you don't have to pay for hydro or gas. But it costs 5 to 10% more than a normal house, so the economy will rise in the near future.
All right, pros and cons. So going back to Calgary, how can we help this city? So pros, their net zero homes are much more renewable and much more efficient. They save, even though they're expensive at first, they save lots of money in the long run. By 2030, it's estimated that a large impact will be shown when most homes are net zero. Now, going to Calgary, since Calgary is the windiest and sunniest city in Canada, we could utilize this by having wind turbines and solar panels. This can drastically lower emissions in Canada's largest greenhouse gas producer, which, as we said before, is Alberta. So now for some cons. If most people switch to this method, large energy companies like Alberta's Enmax will go out of business. New companies need to be made to mass produce solar panels and wind turbines. And of course, the expensive upfront costs of installing net zero systems into your home.
Part 6. Conclusion. This is why we should put these houses in Calgary and many other places in the world to fight climate change. As we said, these don't have they have really little to none carbon emissions, and going into the future, we want a clean earth. And this is why we should input these, and it should start in Canada.
All right, thanks for listening.
Resources. Here's some websites, and here's a video. I gotta laugh.
This is so.
From your own solar panels. Bro, yeah. $80.
Do you want to use that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.